Okay, well, let's begin. It's the top of the hour. Welcome to this 29-minute webinar on inspiring you how to bring your A game to work each day and bring out the best in yourself and in others. And this is actually the section of the program called Your Practices, the 5 practices that bring out the best in yourself. And just a quick backstory, I just did this program again yesterday, and I realized I wanted to take out this section because of time constraints. And I promised the group that I would do a webinar for them. And then I thought, well, let me make this available to everybody. So that's why we're doing it. And there are some of the practices that can make the biggest difference in your ability to bring your best self to work. So I just want to do one quick final sound check now that we've officially started. So sound okay if you could just type in if the sound's still good. Awesome, thanks. Okay, all good, so we will continue. Thanks. So let's talk about these practices. So just like any discipline, any skill, it takes practice to be good. And so being at your best, being in a positive, inspiring, emotional state and mental state day in and day out takes practice. So here are the 5 practices we'll be talking about. Number 1 is emotional accountability, and I'll just touch on that briefly. It's foundational, but I don't want to belabor that point. Number 2, starting the day off with intention. 3, the practice of cultivating greater interpersonal awareness. 4, the practice of cultivating just general overall self-awareness. And then 5, this really critical one, the practice of state optimization. Okay, so let's look at emotional accountability. So unlike small children, we have the brain structures that enable us to modulate our emotional state. So if you have a small child or you have a grown-up child, you remember when they were little kids can't modulate their emotional state. Adults can, although sometimes we forget that we have that ability. And so the foundational mindset for being your best self and bringing your best self into the world is emotional accountability. And that's saying, reminding ourselves, I am responsible for my emotional state, rather than saying, they made me mad, she stresses me out, he's a jerk and that's why I'm upset. And even though it's not easy, at least it isn't for me, when we're dealing with difficult people to be in a calm, resourceful, emotional state, it's our responsibility. It's not theirs to change for us to feel calm and empowered and confident. So the first foundational principle of all of this is to say, I'm responsible for my emotional state. So if there's situations where I feel nervous, aggravated, frustrated, irritable, etc., what do I need to do to become more peaceful, confident, compassionate, etc.? So you think about people who work with the public day in and day out, and there's some people that are able to maintain good cheer regardless of cranky customers, etc. So there are all kinds of resources for cultivating a greater ability to manage our emotional state. And if you know anything about emotional intelligence, you know emotional self-management is a critical component of emotional intelligence. And just to FYI, I'm putting together a handout that goes with this, and I'll put some recommendations for books on increasing your ability to manage your emotional state, to not get stressed out, not get triggered as much. But again, it's an ongoing practice. The second practice is starting the day off with intention. So when you think about how you start the day, are you more like this poor guy, or are you like this little girl? And starting the day off with intention is really foundational for our ability to bring our best self to work. Because if we start off in a chaotic, frazzled mode, it's really hard to feel, quote, centered and present when we're facing difficult people and difficult situations. And so being the source of calm inspiration doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen if we rush through the morning, watch bad news, all the doom and gloom in the world, etc. So here are some things that we can do to start the day off right. So number one is literally starting the day off with some type of intention. So for instance, maybe saying, today I will consciously be more present in my interactions with others. Or maybe today I will consciously look for opportunities to express appreciation and gratitude. Or one of the intentions I oftentimes start the day with is, today I will look for opportunities to uplift others. So when we have some type of intention like that, it primes our brain to notice opportunities to do that thing we want to be. So let's say it's being a better listener. If you start off the day with, I want to be a better listener today, or focus on being a better listener, your brain is more likely to notice opportunities for you to be a better listener. So there's something called in cognitive psychology as priming. And that's an example of priming when you think about, here's something I want to focus on today. Brief exercise that gets your heart pumping. I cannot overemphasize how awesome it is to do this in the morning, to exercise in the morning. And this comes from somebody who, for most of my life, thought people who worked out in the morning were insane, because I just never was a morning workout kind of person until I tried it more than just like one time. And now each day it's just part of my morning routine. And even though some mornings I'll just do like stretches and yoga, because it's important to have recovery days, I find that the mornings that I do really vigorous heart-pounding aerobic with some anaerobic thrown in, that's when I feel the best throughout the day. Not only does it oxygenate your blood so you feel better and think more clearly, it also boosts your dopamine level. And dopamine is a major feel-good biochemical. It has to be vigorous exercise to boost your dopamine level. Also, if you're like me and sometimes focusing is a challenge, doing some vigorous exercise in the morning, because it boosts your dopamine level, really helps you focus more, and you're more productive and you get more work done rather than just feeling antsy and scattered. Third is incorporating some silence in your morning. Now, I know it's easier if you don't have small kids or a big bustling family, but even if you do, maybe it's just having your commute time being silent. And this is really important, both in terms of calming our nervous system. Again, so we're talking about practices that put us in an optimal emotional state. Well, actually, we're starting off. We're talking about starting the day off with intention, but silence actually will be related to when we talk about optimizing our emotional state, because it calms us down, it centers us. But it's also, having silence is really important because it's a way to tap into your intuitive abilities. It's a way to tap into that still, small voice inside. One of the analogies that I use about the importance of silence for forming a stronger relationship with intuition, it's kind of like if you listen to classical music, and you know how classical has a real wide dynamic range, so some passages are really loud, others are really soft. And imagine if you're listening to classical music with your windows down, driving down the highway. With all the road noise, the really quiet, nuanced passages you won't be able to hear because of the road noise. Well, it's the same way with intuition. If we're constantly checking email, constantly on our phone, constantly hearing music or having the TV going, it's like that road noise, and we're not able to hear that more subtle form of communication, of intuition. So incorporating silence. This next one you might find a abhorrent idea, but you might want to try it out. It really works. A cold shower. Now, some people just jump right into a cold shower. I start off warm or hot and then go to cold shower. It not only boosts your immune system, obviously wakes you up, but it actually has been used in helping people get out of depression. It's actually, interestingly enough, if you do cold baths, which I don't recommend. Well, I can't personally recommend, but actually cold is also a great way to boost your metabolism so you burn fat. But I encourage you to try it out. I mean, if you Google cold shower morning, you can read some of the protocols of, some real hardcore people who are into peak performance and how cold showers in the morning are a key part of their practice. No email, no phone, no iPad, no devices for X amount of minutes in the morning, whether it's 30 minutes, 60, 90, whatever. And I know, some people have jobs where they have to respond to email, but I love something that Brendan Burchard says, is that your email inbox is other people's agenda for your day. And so when we immediately start responding to other people's requests, we're not focusing on what are the most important things that I need to get done today. And I get it. I totally get it that if your job requires you do that, so be it. But at least see if you can carve out time in the morning to not respond to emails. And it can really be a game changer. Entrepreneurs and productivity specialists that I follow, this is one that they recommend. And I tell you what, I found it makes a huge difference. Every now and then I get sucked in because it's unfortunately, digital technology is addictive. And so every now and then I get sucked in and check emails, look on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And I could feel the qualitative difference in my thought process. It's almost like the difference between eating good, healthy food versus junk food. It might feel good in the moment, but you don't feel as good after. My thought process isn't as creative or deep, if you will, if I succumb to that. So check that out. And then doing your most important thought work first. This is also something over and over people who are highly productive, highly creative emphasize doing. And then maybe thinking about later. Now, if this was a longer webinar, I'd ask you for what else do you do? Or if this is a live seminar, we would do that. But to think about what are things maybe that you used to do that really helped you start the day off right, that you haven't been doing, and how can you reconnect with that ritual, with that practice? So maybe it's meditation. Now, for what it's worth, I'm starting to incorporate meditation in my morning ritual. I just do just a couple of minutes, and the only reason why I'm trying it again is because some of the people I respect the most in terms of their productivity, creativity, etc., say that doing meditation is the biggest thing that's made a difference for them. And it might have been Tim Ferriss, who talked about how when you meditate, it strengthens the ability of your prefrontal lobe. And the prefrontal lobe plays a major role in our capacity for focus. And so I think of meditation. I also do Qigong. I like to move rather than being stationary, so that's another thing you can do. But given how all the distractibility that's part of our culture and the multitasking, it's destroying our ability to focus. It's destroying our brain's ability to focus. And people who are super creative and super productive, one of the keys is that they're able to focus. And so meditation or Qigong, those are ways of strengthening the focus muscle, if you will. So that's the starting the day off right. Let's talk briefly about interpersonal awareness. So interpersonal awareness is the awareness of how we affect others. Now, I'm sure you work with people, or maybe you've had a boss in the past, or maybe in the current situation where you work, where people just seem clueless about their effect on others. That sometimes you think, do they realize just how rude that is, or just how disrespectful? or do they realize what a turnoff it is when they, interrupt, people and then talk over, or have to be the smartest person in the room, or, whatever it is? One of the aspects of interpersonal awareness that I highly recommend that you practice is being more present when you're around others. In the Inspiring You talk that I gave yesterday at yesterday's conference, I loved it when I was asking people for what practices to engage in that spread goodwill. So that was part of the big three item that I mentioned, that I showed you the slide in the beginning, that was part of the full program. So one of the big three practices that make you a really powerful source of positivity wherever you go is what I call spreading goodwill. And this gentleman in the audience said, just listening to people. And I said, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, because that's such a simple thing that can make all the difference in the world. Because you think about people that you know and you interact with, both in your personal life and at work, is how few people truly listen. And you think about most people, they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can talk, and sometimes they don't even wait, they just interrupt. And you know how that is? I mean, I was talking with somebody yesterday, I was starting to share a really cool story about some really awesome things that some people in the Portland, I live in, or near Portland, Maine, in the Portland community are doing for this really neat restaurant. They're joining together to support this restaurant. And I just started to get into the story about what they were doing. I said like 3 lines, and this person interrupted me and started telling me about their experience with some restaurant. And I'm like, it doesn't make me want to have a whole lot more conversations with you when you do that. So practicing interpersonal awareness, paying attention, how am I showing up? How am I interacting with people? And is it encouraging? Is it truly being present and listening, etc.? I don't want to belabor that. Maybe I already have. I want to move on, but it's a game changer in terms of your ability to bring out the best in people, and especially the more power you get in your career. Because one of the things that we know about research on power, and if you want, you can Google Bob Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N. He's done some great writing on some of the research on how power makes people interpersonally clueless. And so the more power we have, the more likely we are to be interpersonally unaware. And so practicing greater interpersonal awareness. And that's where coaching and getting feedback can be so helpful. Now, self-awareness is obviously related to interpersonal awareness, but it's a broader category that I think of. So when I say interpersonal awareness, I mean in the moment being really tuned into the other person and how they're being affected by you. Overall self-awareness is learning more about yourself and the blind spots that you might have, or that we all have, not that you might have, you do have, because we all have them. And here's a resource I highly recommend, Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There, How Successful People Become Even More Successful. So he's an executive coach who primarily works with C-suite executives. And what he does is work with really great people who are really successful but have reached a plateau in their careers because of their blind spots, things that they could get away with earlier in their career because they didn't have as much impact, now has got them stuck. Or because they have more power, it's exaggerated the negative impact of those behaviors. And so I recommend checking out that book, or just going to YouTube and listening to YouTube, or watching YouTube videos, or reading short articles on what I think there are about 20 items that or negative practices that he identified. But self-awareness so important, because again, we all have blind spots. And so this is where, again, either getting feedback from people that you really respect or working with a coach to identify those patterns. I'll give you a quick example. I worked with a manager who was really frustrated with their team and saw their team as not showing initiative, not being as interested in providing value to the company as they were, and was acting out their frustration that they had toward their team. They were acting out that frustration in how they were treating their team members. So there's this vicious cycle of the less they got from their team members, the more antagonistic, snarky, etc. they were toward the team members, which obviously created more disengagement, more disinterest. And what was so gratifying was after only a couple of months of coaching, this person, when I'll call them Sam. Sam, not the real name. Sam said, I asked Sam during one of our sessions if he wanted to work some more on some of the emotional self-management tools that we had been talking about. So he was more patient, didn't get as irritable, and then turn off his employees more. And it was cool because what he said was, that's kind of a non-issue, because now that I've been doing the sorts of things that we've been talking about, those things that were driving me nuts aren't happening. And so what was happening is for years he was pointing his finger at his team and thinking that they were the problem and not realizing that he was doing a whole host of things that were creating this disengagement, this disinterest. And once we started addressing the blind spots and engaging and having him engage in practices to sort of like heal those wounds, if you will, with his team and doing the right things, the things that were driving him crazy went away. And so that's an example of when we cultivate greater self-awareness and then also the interpersonal awareness, we not only are more effective, but we also have a lot happier time at work. So that's a little bit about self-awareness. Let's go last but not least to state optimization. So one of the things that we know from the world of peak performance is state determines performance. Now, as a surfer, certainly not in Surf That Big, I have huge respect for big wave surfers, and talk about a situation where you really need optimal emotional state to be able to perform well, let alone to be able to live. And so athletes know that their ability to perform well depends on their emotional and mental state. And I encourage you to Google Tony Schwartz's work where he talks about the corporate athlete. So he uses an athlete model. So thinking of yourself as an athlete and treating yourself like an athlete would, an elite athlete. Some other work that I love is by Steve Kotler, and this he's done work on, as you can see, decoding the science behind ultimate human performance. So he's studied elite adventure athletes like big wave surfers, snowboarders, etc., to hack what do they do to get in optimal performance state so they can perform at their best. And so you as an athlete, if you're feeling this energy level, you're obviously not going to perform your best at work, whether it's coming up with great ideas or responding to challenging situations. If you feel like this lady, obviously you're not going to be the wise, centered leader that you want to be when dealing with employee dramas or genuine challenges and difficulties that are taking place. And so state optimization involves the physical foundation, meaning, purpose, passion, inspiration, and joy, an optimal ecosystem. So the physical foundation is asking yourself, are you creating the physical foundation that allows you to perform at your best? So these elite athletes, you can guarantee they're not living on a diet of Mountain Dew and Twizzlers and getting 4 hours of sleep or getting jacked up on Red Bull in the afternoons. So asking yourself, am I eating the foods? Am I getting the sleep? Am I doing the exercise? Am I drinking enough water that allows me to have the physical foundation? So again, I know I'm speeding through this, but as I mentioned, I'll give you the handout. And again, I want you to reflect on these. So the meaning, passion, and purpose, are you tapping into the power of meaning, purpose, and passion? So nobody rides a huge wave like this unless it somehow is meaningful to them. Now, to you, it might be like insane. Like, why do you do that? But to people who do these kind of extreme sports, it has meaning and purpose. And so what you and I want to do is to make sure that we are tapping into our own sources of meaning and purpose. So asking the question, why do you care about what you do? And why do you care about doing it well? And what do you love about your work? And when are you happiest at work? And what difference do you make at work and in the world? And what difference do you want to make? And so in the handout, I'll have these questions because reflecting on them and not just saying like, oh yeah, I know I do good work or I know I care about what I do. It's really think about those instances that speak to you and illustrate to you why you do what you do and why you care about what you do, helps you connect with your heart and that sense of meaning and purpose and passion. And that's a huge, so we're talking about state optimization. When we're connected with meaning and purpose and we feel passion, it's a huge source of energy and vitality. And what a lot of people, they're just sort of, the walking dead throughout the day because they're not tapped into that sense of meaning and purpose. Now later when you get the handout, I'll give you some questions to have you look at the ecosystem that you live in. And so excuse me. The analogy that I like to use is, let's say you go to a tropical rainforest, you see this beautiful orchid, you smuggle it home, don't recommend that. Let's say you do that though, and you plant it in your backyard. Now if you live in Maine like I do, that orchid is not going to last long. And it's not because obviously the orchid is defective, it's because it's not the right ecosystem. And so a lot of people are running on empty energy-wise because they've inadvertently created an ecosystem that doesn't allow them to survive, to thrive, like the poor orchid. So I'm going to send you in the handouts questions that ask you to look at what brings you alive. When are you most filled with joy? When are you so enjoying yourself you lose track of time? And then what people and contexts energize you the most. And I've also got some questions about what is toxic to you. So those are the 5 factors. So the next steps, eagerly await the handouts with the next step recommendations and the resources. Feel free to ask questions. I'm going to give you a slide with the, and also the handouts with contact information. If you're interested in bringing the full program of Inspiring You to your organization, obviously, I want to hear from you. And also if you're interested in the interpersonal self-awareness parts of this and want to grow as a person, as a professional, and are interested in coaching, obviously reach out. And there's all the contact info. And obviously in the handouts, you'll have it. So 29 minutes is up. I am going to officially sign off. But if those of you who have any questions, I will stay on to answer any questions. So thank you for attending. I'll have more coming later. And I will stay on for anybody who has any questions to go deeper. So you can just type your questions in that little box in the bottom right.